March 1945, Remagen, an American half-track on the west bank of the Rhine, 4 heavy barrels tilted toward a sky gone pink with tracer fire. An Arado jet bomber tears through at 456 miles per hour. The gunner squeezes both pistol grips and 2,200 rounds per minute climb toward something too fast to track. The weapon was built to kill planes. It was about to run out of them. This is the story of the M45 Quadmount, 4 electrically driven Browning M2 heavy machine guns firing from a single turret, designed to fill the sky with steel and ultimately feared more on the ground than it ever was in the air. American soldiers called it the meat chopper. The name was earned horizontally, not vertically, and the story of how it was earned begins with a problem that no single gun could solve. To understand why 4 50 caliber machine guns were bolted to a single mount, you have to understand what one gun could not do. By the late 1930s, military aircraft were getting faster every year. A single Browning M2 heavy machine gun, the 50 caliber American standard, fired between 450 and 550 rounds per minute. Against a fighter crossing overhead at 300 miles per hour, that rate produced a thin, widely spaced stream of bullets. The mathematics was simple and unforgiving. A gunner had to estimate the aircraft's speed, altitude, and heading, then aim not at where the plane was, but at the point where it would be when the rounds arrived. Even experienced crews connected on roughly 1 engagement in 50. The answer was not more accurate aiming. It was more lead in the air, enough steel that probability replaced precision. Several firms tried to solve this in 1940 and 41. Bendix submitted a powered multi-gun mount. Martin Aircraft submitted another. But the contract went to a former Navy officer named William Leslie Maxson, a man who ran a small precision instruments company in New York City. Maxson had designed a celestial navigation computer for the Navy and would also, improbably, invent the precursor to the frozen TV dinner, pre-cooked meals called stratoplates for the Naval Air Transport Service, and a convection oven some historians consider the ancestor of the modern air fryer. His company won 3 Army-Navy E awards and held contracts worth nearly $19 million. Yet Maxson understood something the larger firms missed. A quad mount was not simply 4 guns bolted to a frame. It was a fire control problem. The gunner needed to swing over 2,000 pounds of loaded steel as smoothly as he moved his own wrist, or the 4 streams would scatter uselessly across the sky. What Maxson built solved that problem completely. But the weapon's true purpose was still waiting, on the ground, not in the air. Maxson's twin-gun M33 mount was standardized in February 1942. By December of that year, his 4-gun version, tested as the T61, became the M45 Quadmount. What separated it from every competitor came down to a single engineering obsession: electric power traverse. 2 6-volt batteries, kept charged by a small Briggs & Stratton gasoline generator the crews called the lawnmower engine, powered motors that drove the turret in both traverse and elevation. The gunner controlled everything through 2 pistol grip handles. Push the left grip forward and the mount rotated clockwise. Push the right and it rotated counterclockwise. Tilt either grip forward, the barrels depressed. Tilt back, they elevated. And here was the detail that mattered. The system was proportional. The harder the gunner pushed, the faster the turret moved, up to 60 degrees per second in any direction. A gentle nudge tracked a slow target. A hard shove whipped 4 barrels across the sky fast enough to follow a diving fighter. 360 degrees of traverse, minus 10 to plus 90 degrees of elevation. No hand cranks, no shoulder bracing. The gunner's wrist did the work and 2,400 pounds of loaded turret answered. Each of the 4 M2 Browning heavy machine guns was fed by a 200-round ammunition chest, the crews called a tombstone. 89 pounds fully loaded. 800 rounds sat ready on the mount. At full cyclic, all 4 barrels together poured out roughly 2,200 rounds per minute. Aiming was done through the M18 reflex sight, a collimator with illuminated rings that let the gunner estimate lead visually against moving targets. It was not a computing sight. There was no mechanical brain calculating deflection angles. The gunner guessed, and the sheer volume of fire forgave the error. This is why the quad mount existed. Not because 4 guns were 4 times as accurate, but because 4 guns made accuracy almost irrelevant. But the feature that would ultimately define the weapon's most terrifying reputation was almost an afterthought in the original design. The 4 barrels could be adjusted to converge at a specific range, tightened so that all 4 streams met at a single point in space. Against aircraft, convergence was typically set at several hundred yards. Against a target on the ground, a foxhole, a window, a tree line, it meant focusing 2,200 rounds per minute into a space the size of a doorway. Nobody at the Maxim Corporation designed the M45 for that. Not yet. The M45 turret was married to the M3 half-track chassis to create the M16 multiple-gun motor carriage. White Motor Company, working from a plant on East 79th Street in Cleveland, Ohio, built 2,877 new M16S between May 1943 and March 1944. Another 677 older models were converted to M16 standard. Maxim himself never mass-produced his own turret. That work went to Landers, Frary and Clark, and, improbably, the Kimberly-Clark Corporation. Between them they built over 13,000 M45 mounts. Maxim's company manufactured the electric hearts of the system, over 15,000 variable speed drives, but never the turret that bore his name. He died of cancer in July 1947 at 49 years old. He never saw the weapon serve in Korea or Vietnam. The M16 first saw heavy combat in Italy in early 1944, where crews at the Anzio beachhead were among the last Americans to fire the Quad 50 at Luftwaffe aircraft in serious numbers. After D-Day, Allied air supremacy over France became so total that M16 crews spent days scanning empty skies. A weapon built to kill planes had nothing left to shoot at. So the gunners lowered the barrels. A lot of these stories don't get told anywhere else. Subscribing helps make sure we can keep telling them. Now, back to the Quad 50. No single order authorized it. No manual described it. Anti-aircraft battalions carried ground fire as a recognized secondary mission, but the transition from sky to earth was driven entirely from below, by crews who discovered that minus 10 degrees of gun depression, 360-degree electric traverse, and 4 converging streams of 50 caliber fire made the M45 the most devastating close-range weapon an infantryman could face. Snipers concealed in trees were not hunted with rifles. The Quad 50 was aimed at the trunk and the entire tree was cut down, sniper included. A US Army Signal Corps photograph from November 1944 already carried the caption, "Now in use against enemy ground targets inside Germany." By the Battle of the Bulge in December, the ground role had become dominant. They called it the meat chopper. They called it the Krautmauer. Both names were American. No verified German nickname has survived in primary sources, but what is documented is that the 50 caliber Browning was, in the words of one wartime assessment, particularly hated by the Germans. 4 of them firing simultaneously compounded that hatred beyond anything a single barrel could produce. At Remagen, the meat chopper faced its most extreme test from both directions, sky and ground. Captain Carlton Denton, known to his men as Pappy, commanded Battery D of the 482nd Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion. His half-tracks arrived at the captured Ludendorff Bridge at 3 a.m. on March 8, 1945, the first anti-aircraft unit on scene. By 4:44 that afternoon, 8 Stukas and a single Messerschmitt dove straight up the Rhine toward the bridge. Denton's crews opened fire. 8 of the 9 aircraft went down. Within 6 days, American defences at Remagen swelled to 672 anti-aircraft weapons, ringed by 25 barrage balloons, the densest concentration of American anti-aircraft fire anywhere in the entire war. Goering, furious, assembled a special jet strike force. Arado Tu-34 jet bombers and Messerschmitt Tu-62 fighter bombers launched the first operational jet bombing attacks against a tactical ground target in history. Goering called the operations room seeking suicide volunteers. 2 pilots stepped forward. Their squadron commanders talked them out of it. Over 10 days, 367 Luftwaffe aircraft attacked the bridge. Roughly 106 were shot down, nearly 30% of the attacking force. The fire was so intense that spent 50 caliber slugs falling back to earth injured over 200 friendly American troops, described by one officer as falling like hard rain. First Lieutenant Frank Denny Winchester of the 482nd was killed defending the bridge. He received the Purple Heart and Bronze Star posthumously. But the M45 was not invincible, and honesty demands saying so. At full cyclic rate, 800 ready rounds lasted exactly 22 seconds, then silence, while 2 loaders wrestled 89-pound tombstone chests into position. The total 5,000 rounds aboard the half-track brought roughly 2 minutes and 16 seconds of continuous fire. After that, the meat chopper was an unarmed target. The M3 half-track's quarter-inch side armour stopped rifle bullets at range and little else. Heavy machine guns, anti-tank rifles, mortar fragments, and mines all penetrated easily. The thin floor made crews, in the Army's own assessment, extremely susceptible to landmines, and the turret was open to the sky. The gunner crouched behind a frontal shield. The two loaders stood almost entirely exposed. One veteran, returning to a museum decades later and recognizing the weapon on display, said simply, "There is the reason I am almost deaf today. Not only did I go deaf, but I nearly burnt my hands off changing the barrels." Against the jets at Remagen, the Arado at 456 miles per hour, the Messerschmitt 262 at 540, the M45 was individually hopeless. Its effective range of roughly 1,000 metres meant a jet crossed the engagement envelope in under 4 seconds. The M18 reflex sight could not compute lead at those speeds. The post-war verdict was blunt. The M45 Quadmount was ineffective against the new, fast-flying planes of the jet age. And yet at Remagen, the weapon that could not individually track a jet helped destroy 106 aircraft in 10 days. The limitation proved the design philosophy. The M45 was never meant to be a scalpel. It was always meant to be a wall. Mass the weapon, saturate the sky, let statistics replace marksmanship. The flaw was real. The answer was to bring more of them. The Quad 50 outlived its designers, its manufacturers, and 2 of the 3 wars it fought in. In Korea, M16 half-tracks were turned against massed Chinese infantry at the Chosin Reservoir in the winter of 1950. Crews were so desperately short of ammunition, they fired only 2 of their 4 barrels to conserve rounds. A promised airdrop of 50 caliber ammunition was diverted to Marine units across the reservoir. The task force commander, Lieutenant Colonel Don Faith, was killed on December 2nd and received the Medal of Honor posthumously. Korean crews, tired of being picked off by snipers while reloading the open turret, welded on folding armour plates they called bat wings, a field modification eventually adopted as standard on the M45F variant. The soldiers who used the weapon kept redesigning it, war after war, because nothing else did what it did. In Vietnam, the M45 found its 3rd war on the backs of cargo trucks. After a devastating convoy ambush on Route 19 in September 1967, transportation units mounted Quad 50s on deuce-and-a-half and 5-ton trucks to create gun trucks, armoured escort vehicles with names painted on their sides like Eve of Destruction, Bounty Hunter, and Ace of Spades. Ace of Spades was built by a 19-year-old draftee named Sammy C. Eve of Destruction is the only surviving original Vietnam combat gun truck, now preserved at the Army Transportation Museum at Fort Eustis, Virginia. Israel took the concept furthest, replacing the 4 50 caliber guns with 2 20mm cannons salvaged from retired French jet fighters to create the TCM-20, which fought in 3 more wars and served into the 1990s. In 2024, Israel revived stored rapid-fire anti-aircraft systems to counter drone threats, proving that the multi-barrel concept Maxson patented in 1940 remains tactically relevant 85 years later. 4 barrels tilted toward a pink sky over Remagen, 2,200 rounds per minute aimed at something too fast to track. Now you know what happened when the sky emptied and the barrels came down. The M45 Quadmount was designed to kill aircraft. It became the most feared ground weapon in the American arsenal, not because of what it was built to do, but because of what the men behind it decided to do when the planes stopped coming. What do you think the M45's real legacy is? The anti-aircraft defense it was designed for, or the devastating ground fire role it was never meant to fill? I'd like to hear your take in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.